Hello and welcome to Business on the Wire. Even as the last few quarters were marked by an economic slowdown, a startling feature was the rise in unemployment figures. While the lockdown, of course, blew a crater sized hole in the unemployment numbers, a recovery has not been easy. October data, in fact, shows that unemployment numbers have risen again to 7% versus 6.7% in September. While none of this is unknown, the Bihar election seemed to have been a headline moment of sorts where jobs came back to the political discourse. RJD's chief ministerial candidate Tejasvi Yadav promised 10 lakh votes if he was voted to power in Bihar. In a narrowly fought contest, Yadav and his coalition of parties lost, but he seems to have successfully brought that conversation about jobs back on the agenda. What's the story behind the numbers, and have indeed jobs become the center of the economic and political discourse? Joining me to talk about that is Professor Santosh Mehrotra. He's an expert in that area and author of the recently released book, Reviving Jobs: An Agenda for Growth. Thank you, Professor, for joining in and speaking with me. I want to first talk about the Bihar phenomenon and what happened in those elections, because the big talking point was that jobs came back on the agenda. Would you agree with that?
Of course, it goes without saying that for the first time in electoral history, I would say in recent times, jobs was really top of the agenda, and it was set by the RJD, and then of course the JDU and BJP responded with 19 lakhs, while the RJD had talked about 10 lakhs. And it's interesting that this was confirmed by the CSDS poll, the exit poll, which showed what was the topmost item on people's minds, on voters' minds. Uh, After development, which is a sort of, catch-all category, the most important was unemployment. So there's no question about it. And if you're asking me why this was the case, then the answer in many ways is actually obvious for two reasons. One, pre-pandemic, the country had hit an unemployment rate which was at a 45-year high. Youth unemployment was very high. It had tripled between 2012 and 2019. Youth unemployment from 6% to 18%, and graduate unemployment had gone over that from 18% to 36%. Now, if this was the situation pre-pandemic, imagine years, millions of people were leaving UP, Bihar, Bengal, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, etc. for other parts of the country which were growing faster. And when the pandemic hit and migrants came back, they were jobless when they came back because they had been rendered jobless by the pandemic. And when they came back, they were jobless. And there were now millions of people in the rural areas who, even if they got Manrega work, it was at much lower wages, often below minimum wages. And because there were millions of more workers, rural wages collapsed. And in any case, when they returned, it was the peak agricultural season, it was the cutting season, it was then came the sowing season for the new crop. There was work then. Now there's no work. This is the lean season. So, all this talk about, good monsoon leading to rural demand rising is is unfortunately neither here nor there, because it is temporary, and the rural demand is only from a few million rich farmers. Yes, it's true that tractor sales have increased, but who buys tractors? What proportion of total farming families have a tractor? So I mean, let's keep a sense of perspective in all of this.
Any early trends yet, sir, on what's happening with reverse migration? Because given what you're painting as a picture in rural India, and anecdotally as well, it seems like many of those who made that journey by foot to their villages are now going back to urban centers trying to find some work.
True, but work is still very limited, even in urban centers. They are going back in search of work. It doesn't automatically follow that they are getting work. So, for
Correct.
instance, again, and if you're asking about early data, unfortunately, there is very little data so far on this return. It tends to be still pretty much anecdotal, and the anecdotal is telling its own story. From Bihar, we were seeing pictures of Patna and of other towns, where at the labor chowk, you know that every city in our country has a labor chowk, where the daily casual workers, construction workers mostly, congregate in early in the morning in search for work, and contractors may turn up, or you and I may turn up looking for the odd job to be done. Now, what these labor chalks were reporting, the laborers themselves were reporting, that at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, there were still dozens of people waiting for work, when by 11 o'clock that chalk used to be clear till a few years ago, and till a few months ago. So the fact of the matter is that construction jobs were slowing even pre-pandemic, and they collapsed after that. Some sites may have reopened, uh, but you can imagine that if you have millions in the construction sector, literally millions, because one of the things that I think we need to recognize is something quite remarkable happened after 2004-5. Because infrastructure investment grew very rapidly, um, millions were pulled out of agriculture. You see, most people just think of rural-urban migration as a linear phenomenon which has been going on for decades. Yes and no. The fact of the matter is that all the way until 2004-5, for 50 years since our country had been in existence, the absolute number of workers in agriculture was still rising. The share of workers in agriculture might have been falling, but because the absolute number of workers in agriculture was increasing until 4-5, the rate of absorption outside of agriculture that demonstrated was extremely low. Post 2004-5 until at least 2012, because infrastructure investment increased, because real estate investment both in housing, residential housing as well as in commercial estate increased, there were 5 million people leaving agriculture every year. Every year, there was an absolute decline in the number of workers in agriculture of 5 million per annum, and 37 million left over that 7-year period. That's a first in Indian history. That meant that construction jobs were pulling workers out of agriculture. At the same time, Manrega started providing work in rural areas from about 2005, so that there was a tightening of the labor market in rural areas, which raised wages in rural areas. And as construction work in rural as well as urban areas rose, real wages continued to rise. So real wages rising led to a decline in poverty, which was unprecedented. There was a decline in absolute poor, which had never happened until 2004-5. It's very important to recognize this. Until
Yeah.
4-5, the absolute number of poor had remained stagnant in our country at about 320 million people for 30 years. Now, but because non-agri jobs were increasing fast after 2005 at the rate of 7.5 million per annum, and because construction jobs in particular were rising, and Manrega, you saw a upward trend in real wages, and as real wages rose, poverty declined. So millions were pulled out of poverty. 140 million people came out of poverty between 2004-5 and 11-12. And unfortunately, the growth of non-agri jobs post 2012 slowed. It fell from 7.5 million per annum to 2.9 million per annum. And that's the foundation of the crisis before pandemic.
I want to, focus a bit, Professor Mehrotra, on what's happening or what numbers you see trending across northern India. Do you see this situation as far more intense in northern India, and do you think it's going to get worse in terms of the job situation for North India specifically?
Unfortunately, I have to regret to say that the answer is yes, that it's going to get worse, and it is certainly much worse for the obvious reason that this year we already know that the macroeconomy is going to contract by 10%.
Yeah.
And there is no certainty that in fiscal year 22 we are not going to contract. It will be good if we remain at 0% growth in FY22. And if that is correct, then it means that the earliest we might begin to grow is 22-23, and then we might begin to move towards 19-20 GDP levels. The implication of this for jobs across the country, but particularly in North India where there was surplus labor already, that millions have returned, and therefore joblessness is going to remain. It may not increase, but it's certainly not improving, because the economy is going to begin to recover only very slowly. Now, let's just remember that I'm sure you'll talk about the stimulus packages, but let me anticipate that a little bit by saying that our contraction in the economy post pandemic is the worst, probably the worst in the world, because the world, the IMF said in its World Economic Outlook of October, just 1 month ago, that the world is going to contract this year by 4.4%. India is going to contract by 10.3%. The US is going to contract by lower than the world average, Japan as well, Europe as well. And the BRICS countries are obviously going to contract by more than 4.4, which is the world average. But India is going to, among the BRICS countries, the worst. Why? Because of the poor quality of our stimulus package. I emphasize the poor quality of our fiscal package, to be precise.
Mm. How did you read the decision or the announcement by the Uttar Pradesh government saying that they aim to provide jobs for at least 50 lakh youth till March 2021? First of all, does it look implementable? And secondly, what kind of policies can a state government take on to provide jobs to that degree?
Okay, so let me say 2 or 3 things in response to that very, very shrewd question, I must say. You see, Bihar and UP accounted for 3.5 million of the 5 million that were leaving agriculture between 2004-5 and 11-12. So clearly Bihar, UP were not being able to provide jobs with non-agricultural jobs within their state. Otherwise, why did they leave?
Correct.
Question 1. And they have now returned. What has changed since then in Bihar and UP about its governance level? That, which is my second point. The reason why industry doesn't get attracted to a Bihar or a UP is because their governance is poorer than in the southern and the western states. And because their governance is poorer, they don't attract investment, and therefore they have not been successful in improving the prospect for jobs in the non-agricultural sector. Now, please understand that while construction has been growing in North India as well, the fact of the matter is the young of UP, Bihar, etc. and North India have gotten in the last 10 to 15 years much better educated than before. I began with some statistics about youth unemployment having shot up in 6 years.
Yeah.
Let me explain the background of that. Because that youth unemployment is equally high, please understand, in UP and Bihar in North India. Why? Because the youth of UP and Bihar and most of North India have also gotten better educated. Their expectations are not for working in agriculture. Their expectations are that they will work in urban areas and in industry or in modern services. It's in modern services only where the jobs have been increasing, which is what you're seeing post-pandemic as well, e-commerce or IT, etc. The point is, UP Bihar, if they are not able to attract more industry, why do you think, have not so far, has the governance improved in the last 6 months? That suddenly you're going to see a turnaround in jobs in the non-agricultural sector. Please give me one reason why there would be a turnaround. You know, just because UP might have some reasonable skill programs don't create jobs. They might produce young people who might be a bit better vocationally aware. And if you ask me more, I can sort of explain to you vocationally aware doesn't mean vocationally trained, because most of these youngsters have been provided barely 3-month training in 3-month courses. If they might have gotten a certificate of 10th pass or 12th pass, and then they get a 3-month vocational training, that doesn't mean that they are employable in formal sector industry. They might get some unorganized sector work.
How do you think this conversation is going to move ahead, Professor Mehrotra? Because as you pointed out, unemployment has been a lingering problem for several quarters now, even before the pandemic came and really gave it a 1-2 punch. Will politicians and governments be forced to put out these kind of targets, but that doesn't lead to anything in terms of job creation, or do you think this will now slowly become a very, very important electoral agenda?
It's going to become a bigger electoral agenda, but unfortunately, the recent responses seem to suggest that the governments are already saying, oh, you need domicile in our state before we will give you jobs, not just in government but also in the private sector. This is a beggar my neighbor policy, which will never work. Because if Haryana does it today, tomorrow Punjab will do it, and next Rajasthan will do it, and then Madhya Pradesh will do it, and so on and so forth, and they have already been doing it and testing it. In the last analysis, if the size of the pie is not growing, there's no point in saying, oh, whatever pie is there, we will parse it out, apportion it between our own people and those elsewhere. What have I been describing to you? That in the period of the fastest growth, in the period of the fastest decline in poverty between 4-5 and 13-14, we saw workers move from one part of the country to another to work in other parts of the country which were growing faster, which were attracting investment. Now you're moving in the opposite direction. You've already, meaning that you're going to say, oh, we are going to provide you work here. Is the size of the cake expanding? Is the economy growing? We've already talked about that. The economy is not expected to return to 1920 level before 23 perhaps. So when will the jobs grow in these very states? Are you turning around governance overnight in the north of India? So this is flying in the face of facts. And unfortunately, what I fear is, on the one hand, radicalization of jobless youth. On the other hand, their lumpenization, they're being used by fundamentalist groups. They're becoming, I see them becoming terrorizers of cow traders in rural areas. Because if you are jobless, you have a you have some certificate, but you are jobless for months on end or years on end. Then what do you do to make a living? You don't want to be in agriculture. And I want to point out to one particular fact. As the Center for the Monitoring of Indian Economy, CMI, has been reporting for the last several years, and the NSS confirms it, that the labor force participation rate is falling. What is the meaning of that? Let me explain that for the ordinary people of India. You see, we keep talking about the demographic dividend, Mitali. What is the demographic dividend? That the share of working age population in the total population is rising. Of course, it has been rising. But then what is the meaning of the fall in the labor force participation rate? It means that those who are reaching working age, and as I said, getting better educated, have stopped looking for work. Labor force participation rate falling means that you are in working age, but you're not looking for work. You're not only in the workforce, you're not even looking for work. So in other words, you've gotten discouraged because non-agri jobs, which is what you were looking for, are not growing fast enough, and therefore you fall out of the labor force, you stop looking. This is happening not just for girls, this is happening for boys. This is catastrophic. This is like saying our demographic dividend is already becoming a nightmare. And please remember, most politicians, most bureaucrats do not understand that in 15 years we will become an aging society. We will no more be a young society. We may be among the younger societies today, but every day we are aging. Just as the number of young people entering the working age is increasing. So if we don't create jobs for which we have to grow much faster, we are asking for a nightmare scenario.
Another thing happened through the pandemic or post the pandemic, Professor, which is that much of this youth that we've been chatting about are concentrated in the services sectors, spaces like hospitality, tourism, F&B, and many of them have lost their jobs from there. There's been some talk about constructing some kind of an urban employment program. I want to know where you stand on that one and whether you think that can address this kind of job loss successfully, or do you think they're two different and parallel problems?
So where I stand on the urban employment guarantee is that it is a necessity. I don't think in Atmanirbhar Bharat Package 3, the talk about low cost urban housing is enough. It is good, but it is nowhere close to being enough, because let me explain why I feel an urban employment guarantee is a good idea. At this juncture in particular, when the government is facing a shortage of fiscal space, the government has just in Atmanirbhar 3 increased the Manrega amount by 10,000 crores. In the package number 2, it had increased it by 40,000 crores. Good, but even with that increased amount, the number of those looking for Manrega work is shooting up and not enough work is being provided. So you're not meeting demand there. On the other hand, workers are needed to revive MSME sectors, to revive the construction sector in urban areas. If the government was to spend more on urban Manrega, it would be substitutive of what you need to spend on rural Manrega. So in other words, the fiscal cost will actually tend to decline, or it will neutralize it, while finding workers here, while pulling workers back. So this is a profoundly important reason, quite apart from the fact that urban infrastructure needs to improve. Very simple. Very simple. If you want to attract investment in your cities, in your small towns in particular, near where the clusters are, the clusters of manufacturing industry are, it's critical that you do that. Point one. Modern services, you said, that's where the jobs have been rising. But modern services require a certain amount of education and skill. Only the better educated and the better skilled are going to be able to find work there, which is the reason why for nearly 5 years I've been making an argument that this country needs a manufacturing strategy. It needs to develop manufacturing in the same way that China managed, that Vietnam managed, that Bangladesh is doing, and we can't. Would you know that the manufacturing share of GDP was 17% in 1991? In 2016, it was still 17%. It has not grown. So, in other words, manufacturing has not been a lead sector in our growth story. Point two, despite Make in India, which was announced on August 15, 2014 itself, the share of manufacturing in GDP fell to 15% in the last 3 years. The share of manufacturing in employment fell from 12.8% in 2012 to 12.1% in 2018. Absolute number of workers in manufacturing fell in those same 6 years. This is for the first time in India's history. This is despite Make in India. This shows beyond a shadow of doubt what a failure Make in India is. So I'm pleased about the performance linked incentive scheme. Der aaye, durust aaye, never, better late than never, that 12 sectors have been included in the performance linked incentive scheme. But this is not going to be enough. You need a manufacturing strategy which was much more broad ranging. And I could walk you through what the components of an industrial policy in India need to be. Unfortunately, we need not just sectoral interventions like PLI is, like the 12 sector package number 3 is. We need broad based, especially for instance in labor intensive sectors. There are 5 sectors which are labor intensive manufacturing in our country. They saw manufacturing sector, they saw a decline in employment in those very 5 sectors. What are those? Textiles, garments, food processing, wood and furniture, and finally leather and footwear. These 5 account for 50% of total manufacturing employment in our country. There was an absolute decline in manufacturing employment in these sectors for the first time in India's history. These sectors need sectoral packages, but we need other things in addition. You cannot solve the problem by simply raising tariffs. Tariffs alone will not do it. You will have to do 2 other things. One, you cannot allow the real effective exchange rate to have appreciated, which it has appreciated by 20% in India for over the last 6 years. With a appreciation of the effective exchange rate, what you get essentially is a tax on exports. You are encouraging imports. So why are you surprised that your trade deficit was as severe? Point one. Point two, how does trade policy need to change? For several years, many of us economists and FICCI and CII have been making the case for removing the inverted duty structure in our country. What is the inverted duty structure which militates against domestic manufacturing? You see, unfortunately, the way the tariff structure evolved for about 15 to 20 years prior to 2015, and it hasn't changed very much since then, is the following: that finished goods imports incurred a low tariff, but intermediates and raw materials required to produce those same manufactures in India had a higher tariff. It militates against domestic manufacturing and it encourages encourages imports. So you have to change this inverted duty structure. The RBI has to work towards ensuring that the exchange rate, effective exchange rate stops appreciating. Without that, you will not get broad-based jobs in manufacturing.
Just one final question to you, Professor. There's been a lot of headline management, if you'd like to call it that, about how the GST numbers are again crossing 1 lakh crores, the auto sales offtake that you mentioned, electricity generation. Is it possible that we will continue to see this kind of information in terms of, small sprouts of recovery, even as unemployment numbers and the general labor situation continues to worsen? Can the two be this diverse?
No, they cannot be. Let's just remind ourselves that there was a September deadline in respect of filing of GSTs, and there was an increase in the number of filings which had accumulated until September, and you saw an increase in GST takings of the government. The fact of the matter is that this is temporary. It's partly also driven by the festive season. It's partly driven by the unlock. There was built up effective demand after, over months of non-spending where people had saved, savings had increased. Everyone's talking about that. And you saw an increase of the GST increase. This is with all due respect, a flash in the pan. Of course, there will be slow recovery. Recovery to what? Recovery from contractions. Contractions which are unprecedented in our history. Contractions which are the worst that have occurred in any part of the world. So let's keep a sense of balance here with all due respect.
Wonderful speaking with you, Professor. Thank you so much for joining in and making such great points. I do hope personally as well that this unemployment issue needs to get the kind of front and center attention it deserves. But thank you today for your time.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.